I'm Emma, 20 years old, and I've been living with type 1 diabetes since I was 7. My parents always treated my younger sister Sophia like their golden child, but I never thought they'd leave me to slip into a diabetic coma while they celebrated her acceptance into Harvard Medical School. As they toasted her success with expensive champagne, my blood sugar was plummeting to levels that could have killed me. If you're watching this from somewhere safe, please hit like and subscribe and let me know in the comments if you've ever felt like a burden to the people who should care most about you. Growing up with type 1 diabetes meant my childhood was defined by constant vigilance. I was diagnosed at 7 after my teacher noticed I was drinking excessive amounts of water and asking to use the bathroom every few minutes. What started as a normal Tuesday morning ended with paramedics rushing me to the hospital as my small body fought against dangerously high blood sugar levels. The doctors explained to my parents that my pancreas had essentially shut down, no longer producing the insulin my body needed to process sugar. From that day forward, my life would revolve around blood glucose monitoring, insulin injections, carbohydrate counting, and the constant fear of both hyperglycemic and hypoglycemic episodes. My family never truly adapted to the reality of my condition. My father, Michael, was a successful corporate lawyer who approached problems with the expectation that they could be solved through willpower and proper management. He viewed my diabetes as a character weakness rather than an autoimmune disease, often suggesting that I simply needed to try harder to maintain stable blood sugar levels. My mother, Victoria, worked as a high-end real estate agent for celebrity clients, more concerned with maintaining her professional image than understanding the complexities of managing a chronic illness. Both were intelligent, accomplished people who measured worth through achievement and appearance, values that left little room for accommodating medical limitations. Then there was Sophia, 2 years younger than me and absolutely perfect in every way my parents valued. At 18, she was everything I had never been able to be. Academically flawless, socially effortless, physically active without worrying about blood sugar crashes during sports. While I spent high school years carefully timing meals and snacks around class schedules, monitoring my glucose levels between periods, Sophia was captain of the debate team, student body president, and valedictorian. She wasn't intentionally cruel about my condition, just naturally oblivious to the privileges of having a body that functioned exactly as designed. "Emma, do you really need to test your blood sugar at the dinner table?" my mother would ask with barely concealed irritation when we had guests. It's not exactly appetizing for everyone else. As if my medical needs were a performance I could simply choose not to give. "Can't you just eat normally for once?" my father would sigh when I had to calculate carbohydrates before taking insulin. Normal. As if I had chosen to have a malfunctioning pancreas that required precise mathematical calculations just to keep me alive. The pattern of minimization started subtly, but grew more pronounced over time. When I was 10, my parents scheduled a family vacation to Europe during the same week as my endocrinologist appointment, dismissing my concerns about managing my condition in a foreign country without medical consultation. At 14, they forgot to refill my insulin prescription because they were preoccupied with Sophia's early admission interviews for accelerated programs. By 17, I was essentially managing my own medical care because relying on them had become too dangerous to my health. I found comfort in small refuges where I could. Photography became my creative outlet, capturing moments of beauty in a world that often felt hostile to my physical needs. Online support groups connected me with other type 1 diabetics who understood the daily calculations required just to stay alive. My endocrinologist, Dr. Martinez, became the only adult who consistently took my concerns seriously, actually listening when I described symptoms and adjusting my treatment plan accordingly. As Sophia's final year of high school progressed, my parents' priorities became increasingly obvious. Every conversation centered on her college applications, her standardized test scores, her extracurricular achievements. Sophia's SAT prep courses cost more than my yearly supply of continuous glucose monitoring sensors. Her application consultant fees exceeded my insulin costs for an entire year. When she received early acceptance to Harvard Medical School's accelerated program, my parents' excitement reached fevered levels. "We're raising a future doctor," my father announced proudly during a family dinner, his voice practically glowing with vicarious achievement. Harvard Medical School at 18. Unprecedented. My mother clapped her hands together with genuine delight. I've already called everyone we know. The Hendersons, the Clarks, your partners at the firm.
They're all so impressed.
I pushed salad around my plate, silently calculating that Sophia's first-year tuition alone would cover several years of my medical expenses that my parents constantly complained were getting out of hand. Maybe I could help plan the celebration party? I offered, hoping to find some way to participate in my family's joy. My mother's attention barely flickered toward me. Oh, sweetie, this is going to be quite sophisticated. Very adult. We can't have any complications or disruptions. By complications, I understood she meant any visible sign of my diabetes management. My condition remained the family's embarrassing secret, the imperfection that didn't align with their narrative of excellence and success. In the weeks leading up to what they grandly titled Sophia's Harvard celebration, our house transformed into event planning headquarters. Caterers, party planners, and florists streamed through daily. My parents held extensive meetings about menu selection and guest lists while my increasingly urgent requests for prescription refills went completely unheard. Mom, I'm down to my last vial of rapid-acting insulin, I said one morning, holding up the nearly empty medication container. She waved dismissively while scrolling through catering options on her tablet. Add it to the grocery list, dear. I'll get to it when I have a moment. Add it to the grocery list. As if life-sustaining medication could be purchased alongside bread and milk at the local supermarket. My insulin wasn't available at regular pharmacies without prescription authorization and insurance pre-approval, processes that required parental involvement I couldn't secure. My body began displaying warning signs that I recognized from years of self-monitoring, but that my parents either couldn't see or chose to ignore. My blood glucose readings became increasingly erratic, swinging between dangerous highs and precipitous lows. I experienced frequent episodes of blurred vision, excessive thirst, and fatigue that went far beyond normal tiredness. Small cuts and scrapes took weeks to heal properly, a sign that my diabetes was poorly controlled due to inadequate medication supplies. I had a crucial appointment scheduled with Dr. Martinez to review my insulin regimen and discuss the concerning symptoms I'd been experiencing. The appointment was abruptly canceled when my mother realized it conflicted with the final venue walkthrough for Sophia's celebration. Dr. Martinez understands these things happen, she said, not bothering to meet my eyes as she rescheduled for 2 weeks after the party. It's not like it's an emergency. But it felt increasingly like an emergency to me. I spent nights researching diabetic ketoacidosis symptoms online, recognizing too many warning signs in my own experience. The day before the celebration, I made one final attempt to communicate the seriousness of my situation to my parents. I found my father in his home office, reviewing his toast for the following evening. Dad, I really need my prescriptions filled today, I said, my voice steadier than I felt inside. I'm showing signs of poor glycemic control that could become dangerous. He sighed with exasperation of a man dealing with an inconvenient interruption to more important matters. Emma, I have 100 details to finalize before tomorrow night. Your mother has all the insurance information if it's truly urgent. Can't this wait until after we celebrate Sophia's achievement? You've managed your condition for years. One more day won't make a significant difference. But one day could make all the difference. As I left his office, I realized with devastating clarity that in my family's hierarchy of priorities, my health would always rank below Sophia's social advancement. Tomorrow would prove just how potentially fatal that priority system could become. The morning of Sophia's Harvard celebration dawned with unprecedented chaos in our usually orderly household. By 6 a.m., event staff was setting up sound equipment in our backyard while florists arranged elaborate displays throughout the house. The doorbell rang constantly with deliveries. Sophia's custom-designed dress, my mother's jewelry selection, my father's specially tailored suit for his toast. I woke feeling worse than I had in months. My mouth was painfully dry despite drinking water constantly throughout the night. My vision seemed slightly blurred, and I felt weak and disoriented in a way that concerned me deeply. When I tested my blood glucose, the meter displayed a reading of 380 milligrams per deciliter, dangerously high and climbing. Normal blood sugar should range between 80 to 130 mg/dl. I was entering the territory where diabetic ketoacidosis becomes a life-threatening possibility. I found my mother in the kitchen, surrounded by catering staff and event coordinators as she approved last-minute menu modifications. "Mom," I said, my voice competing with the controlled chaos around us, "my blood sugar is really high. I think I need to go to the emergency room." She glanced up with visible irritation, her attention clearly divided between my concerns and the more pressing matters of party preparation. "You're probably just nervous about tonight, honey. Take some of your insulin and rest for a while. We need you looking fresh for photos later." "It's not nerves," I insisted, showing her the glucose meter reading. "Look at this number. This is dangerous territory." "Emma, please." Her voice took on an edge of impatience. "I have the mayor's wife arriving in 30 minutes to preview the dessert selection. Can you please just handle this yourself? You're 20 years old, not 7. She turned away before she could see the tears of frustration welling in my eyes, dismissing both me and my legitimate medical emergency as inconvenient timing. In the hallway, I encountered Sophia wrapped in a silk robe, while a professional makeup artist discussed color palettes for the evening. "Hey, everything okay?" she asked, noticing my obvious distress. It was the first time anyone had inquired about my well-being in weeks. "Not really," I admitted. "I'm having some serious blood sugar issues and feeling pretty terrible." A flicker of genuine concern crossed her features before being quickly replaced by excitement as the hair stylist arrived with cases of professional equipment. "That sucks. Maybe ask Dad?" "Oh my God. Did you bring the extensions we talked about? I can't believe you got the exact color match." And just like that, I was forgotten again, invisible in my own medical crisis. I attempted to call Dr. Martinez's emergency line, but reached only an automated system informing me that for life-threatening emergencies, I should call 911 immediately. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was experiencing what could easily become a life-threatening emergency, but in a household where such possibilities were consistently minimized and dismissed. By late afternoon, the house had transformed into a pre-celebration staging area. My father paced the foyer in his formal attire, coordinating last-minute details via phone calls. My mother floated between rooms in her evening gown, a vision of elegant preparation. Sophia stood at the center of attention in her custom dress, looking like she belonged on a magazine cover celebrating academic achievement. "Emma, you're not dressed yet," my mother observed as I sat on the staircase, feeling increasingly unwell. "The photographer arrives in 20 minutes for family portraits." I looked down at my comfortable clothes, chosen specifically because I felt too sick to wear anything restrictive. "I don't think I should go tonight. My blood sugar won't stabilize, and I'm feeling really sick." "What are you talking about?" she responded with genuine surprise. "Of course you're going. This is your sister's night. We're celebrating as a family." "Mom, I'm really not well enough to attend. I think I might be developing ketoacidosis. I need to stay home and monitor my levels closely." She studied me for a moment, probably noticing my pale complexion and the obvious signs of dehydration. For a brief second, I thought she might finally understand the seriousness of my condition. Instead, she sighed with what sounded suspiciously like relief. "Actually, maybe that is for the best. We can tell people you weren't feeling well, which isn't entirely untrue. One less thing to worry about tonight." "Should someone stay with her?" Sophia asked, surprising me with her awareness of my condition. "Don't be ridiculous," my father interrupted, joining our conversation. "She's an adult, not a child. She can take care of herself for one evening. We'll have our phones if there's a genuine emergency." They continued discussing the evening schedule as if I weren't present, their voices fading into background noise as I contemplated spending the night alone while my condition potentially worsened. When their hired car service arrived to transport them to the venue, my mother pressed a perfunctory kiss to my forehead. "There's leftover Chinese food in the refrigerator if you get hungry. Try to get some rest, and we'll tell you all about it tomorrow." The front door closed behind them with a definitive sound, leaving me alone in the sudden, oppressive silence of our empty house. Through the window, I watched the luxury sedan's taillights disappear into the evening, taking with them any possibility of immediate help. As if responding to their departure, my body began shutting down in earnest. My blood glucose meter now read 420 milligrams per deciliter, a level that put me at serious risk of diabetic coma. At first, I tried to manage the crisis using the limited supplies I had remaining. I administered the last of my rapid-acting insulin, but without sufficient medication reserves, I couldn't deliver the doses necessary to bring my blood sugar down to safe levels. The insulin I had was like trying to stop a flood with a small bandage, completely inadequate for the emergency I was facing. Within an hour, I began experiencing the classic symptoms of diabetic ketoacidosis. Nausea overwhelmed me in waves, forcing me to spend long periods hunched over the bathroom toilet. My breathing became rapid and shallow as my body tried to compensate for increasing acidity in my bloodstream. The distinctive fruity smell of ketones became noticeable on my breath, a sign that my body was essentially consuming itself for energy in the absence of properly managed glucose. I attempted to call my parents multiple times, but the calls went straight to voicemail. The celebration was clearly in full swing, the venue probably loud with music and conversation. I sent increasingly desperate text messages. Blood sugar over 400.
Feeling really sick.
Need help. The response came 20 minutes later. Having wonderful time.
Can't hear phone well.
We'll call later. They weren't even reading my messages properly, let alone understanding the medical emergency I was describing. I tried calling Sophia directly, but the background noise made communication impossible.
What?
I can't hear you, she shouted over what sounded like a live band. The Harvard dean just gave the most amazing speech about my potential. I'll call you back later. The call ended abruptly, leaving me alone with a rapidly deteriorating medical situation that was moving beyond my ability to self-manage. My vision began tunneling as dehydration and blood chemistry imbalances affected my brain function. I knew I needed emergency medical intervention, but my coordination was becoming so impaired that I couldn't successfully dial 911. My hands shook uncontrollably, making it impossible to press the correct numbers on my phone. After 3 failed attempts, my phone slipped from my trembling fingers and shattered on the tile floor, eliminating my primary means of calling for help. Panic coursed through me as I realized the severity of my isolation. I tried to stand, thinking I could reach the landline in the kitchen, but the sudden movement triggered a wave of nausea so intense that I collapsed back onto the bathroom floor. My body was entering the final stages of diabetic ketoacidosis, a condition that could easily prove fatal without immediate medical intervention. Despite knowing it was futile, I frantically searched our medicine cabinet, hoping to find forgotten insulin supplies. All I discovered was the empty prescription bottle, with a refill date stamped for next week, after the celebration, when my parents would have time to address my inconvenient medical needs. My body was essentially poisoning itself, unable to process glucose without the insulin my parents had failed to provide. The symptoms of ketoacidosis intensified rapidly. My breathing became labored as my lungs worked overtime to eliminate excess acids from my bloodstream. My heart rate accelerated as my cardiovascular system strained to function with imbalanced blood chemistry. Most frighteningly, my consciousness began flickering in and out, a sign that my brain was being affected by the toxic buildup of ketones. With the last of my coherent thought, I managed to send one final text to my family's group chat, using every ounce of remaining strength to type and send the message. In ketoacidosis.
Dying.
Help me. As darkness closed in around me, I wondered whether they would even see the message before it was too late, or if they would dismiss it as another inconvenient interruption to their perfect celebration. The last thing I remembered was the sound of my own labored breathing, counting down the moments like a metronome marking the potential end of my life. Oh God, Emma. Emma. My mother's voice cut through the darkness, pulling me toward consciousness from what felt like a very deep place. I couldn't open my eyes, but I sensed frantic movement around me. The sharp scent of my mother's expensive perfume mingled with the sickly sweet smell of ketones that I recognized from my own breath. Call an ambulance, my father's voice, stripped of its usual commanding tone.
Now.
Is she breathing? Emma, can you hear us? Sophia's voice, high with panic and fear. I wanted to respond, to let them know I was still there, barely hanging on, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I existed in a strange liminal space, aware but disconnected from the chaos unfolding around me. Time fragmented into incomprehensible pieces. Snippets of conversation reached me through the darkness. Jesus, her breathing is so shallow. Her pulse is rapid and weak. The ambulance is 4 minutes out. How long has she been like this? Did you know she was this sick? Why didn't she tell us it was this serious? That last question, asked in my father's bewildered tone, might have made me laugh if I had been capable of such a response. I had told them. I had been telling them for days, weeks, years. The next clear memory was the sensation of being moved, the careful transfer to a gurney as paramedics took over my care, the sharp pinch of an 4-needle entering my arm, the oxygen mask covering my face, the siren wailing as the ambulance raced toward the hospital. 20-year-old female, type 1 diabetic, severe DKA with altered mental status, the paramedic reported over radio. Blood glucose over 500, blood pressure 90/50 and dropping. Multiple 4-access established, initiating fluid resuscitation. Need endocrine consult and ICU bed on arrival. The clinical assessment faded as I drifted back into unconsciousness, my body finally able to relax now that qualified medical professionals were managing my care. When I next became aware, the soundscape had changed completely. The steady beeping of heart monitors, the hum of 4 pumps, the soft squeak of medical personnel moving efficiently through the space. I was in a hospital room. I forced my eyelids open, each one feeling impossibly heavy. The harsh fluorescent lighting made me squint until my vision adjusted to reveal my surroundings. They were there, my parents, still wearing their formal celebration attire, sitting in chairs beside my hospital bed. My mother's elegant hairstyle had partially collapsed, and my father's tie hung loosely around his neck. Sophia sat across the room, her beautiful dress replaced by hospital scrubs someone must have provided, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. A doctor I didn't recognize stood at the foot of my bed, reviewing my chart with a serious expression. When he noticed I was conscious, he approached with professional concern. "Emma, I'm Dr. Rodriguez. You're in the ICU at General Hospital. Do you understand what happened to you?" I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw and painful. A nurse offered ice chips, which I accepted gratefully, letting them melt slowly before attempting to talk. "Diabetic ketoacidosis," I managed, my voice barely audible. Dr. Rodriguez nodded gravely. "Severe DKA. Your blood glucose peaked at over 550, and your blood pH dropped to dangerously acidic levels. We've been treating you with continuous insulin infusion and fluid replacement for the past 8 hours. You were very close to diabetic coma. If your family hadn't found you when they did, we would be having a very different conversation right now." My mother made a strangled sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp. "When can we take her home?" my father asked, his instinctive response to solve problems immediately reasserting itself. Dr. Rodriguez's expression hardened noticeably. "Mr. Thompson, your daughter nearly died from a preventable medical emergency. According to our pharmacy records, her insulin prescriptions haven't been filled in over 5 weeks. As her insurance beneficiary, that responsibility ultimately falls to you." "We've been extremely busy with our younger daughter's academic celebrations," my mother interjected defensively. "Emma knows how to manage her condition. She should have been more proactive about reminding us about her medication needs." The look Dr. Rodriguez gave her was withering. "I have the text message records here," he said, holding up printed documentation. "Emma sent 17 messages over the past 3 weeks requesting prescription refills. The most recent was sent at 9:15 p.m. last night, stating in ketoacidosis.
Dying.
Help me." This was preceded by numerous other urgent messages that appear to have been ignored or dismissed. My father's face flushed, not with shame but with anger at the potential liability implications. "Now wait just a minute. We provide Emma with excellent medical care. This was an unfortunate oversight during an exceptionally demanding period. An oversight that nearly cost your daughter her life, Dr. Rodriguez countered firmly. As her physician, I'm legally obligated to report suspected medical neglect to the appropriate authorities. A social worker will be visiting later today to assess the home situation. The word, neglect, hung in the air like a toxic cloud. My parents exchanged panicked glances, their carefully constructed image of perfect parenting crumbling before their eyes. I drifted in and out of consciousness over the following hours, awakening fully the next morning to find a woman with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor sitting beside my bed. My parents were nowhere to be seen. Hello, Emma. I'm Sarah Chun from Hospital Social Services. I'd like to talk with you about your living situation if you feel up to it. Something in her compassionate but direct manner broke through defenses I'd built over years of being dismissed and minimized. For the first time in my life, I told someone the complete, unvarnished truth about what it was like to live with a chronic illness in the Thompson household. I described the systematic prioritization of Sophia's needs over my medical care, the minimization of my symptoms and concerns, the financial calculations that always seemed to favor my sister's activities over my prescription costs, the emotional neglect that had become so normalized I had almost stopped recognizing it as harmful. They're not bad people, I found myself saying, surprised by my own impulse to defend them. They just can't see past Sophia's achievements. They never have. Sarah took notes without judgment, asking clarifying questions that helped me articulate experiences I'd never fully examined. When my parents returned later that day, their concern appeared dramatically amplified in her presence. My mother fussed over my blankets and pillows. My father engaged nurses in detailed discussions about my treatment plan. Both performed the roles of devoted parents with convincing sincerity. But as I watched their performance, something crystallized within me. This crisis hadn't fundamentally changed their perception of me or my medical needs. It had simply created a situation they needed to manage to protect their reputation and avoid legal consequences. As Sarah prepared to leave, she discreetly slipped a card into my hand. "You have options, Emma," she whispered quietly. "You don't have to return to an environment that endangers your health." For the first time in years, I felt genuine hope. Not the desperate hope that my parents would magically transform into the supportive family I needed, but the empowering realization that I could create a different reality for myself, one where my health and well-being weren't secondary considerations. I closed my eyes, feigning sleep as my parents discussed in hushed tones how to handle the social worker investigation and minimize damage to their reputation. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I would no longer accept being invisible or treated as an inconvenience. I would demand to be seen and heard, not just by my family but by myself. I had nearly died waiting for them to care. I would never make that mistake again. The hospital became my sanctuary for the next 2 weeks. My body needed time to recover from the severe metabolic disruption of diabetic ketoacidosis, but more importantly, I needed space away from my family to prepare for the confrontation that was coming. My parents visited daily, their concern appearing genuine when medical staff was present but quickly fading when we were alone. They brought flowers, expensive gifts, and promises of better attention to my medical needs, tangible evidence of care they could point to if questioned. "We've postponed our planned vacation to Martha's Vineyard," my mother informed me, as if this sacrifice should earn my gratitude. "We'll be home all summer to help with your recovery." Sophia visited less frequently, but seemed genuinely shaken by what had happened. "I had no idea it was that serious," she admitted during one visit, perched uncomfortably on the edge of my bed. "Why didn't you ever explain how dangerous it could get?" "I did explain," I replied simply. No one was listening. The person who listened most attentively was Dr. Martinez, my endocrinologist, who was horrified to learn what had occurred. He became my fiercest advocate, working with Dr. Rodriguez and Sarah from Social Services to develop a comprehensive care plan that wouldn't depend on my parents' inconsistent attention. "You have rights as an adult patient," he reminded me. "Even as a dependent on your parents' insurance, you can take legal control of your medical decisions." I spent hours researching patient rights, medical advocacy, and legal protections for adults with chronic illnesses. I documented my medical history, the pattern of neglect, and the financial resources my parents possessed to provide adequate care. I compiled evidence of their priorities through bank statements showing Sophia's educational expenses versus delayed or denied medical costs. As my discharge date approached, I requested a family meeting in my hospital room. Dr. Rodriguez, Sarah, and Dr. Martinez would attend as neutral witnesses and advocates. I prepared meticulously for what would be the most important confrontation of my life, knowing that my future health and independence hung in the balance. The day arrived with tension that seemed to electrify the air. My parents entered with the confident bearing of people accustomed to controlling situations through authority and financial power. Sophia followed behind them, her expression uncertain and worried. Dr. Rodriguez, Sarah, and Dr. Martinez positioned themselves around my bed like a protective barrier. The stage was set for a reckoning years in making. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice stronger and clearer than I'd expected. "I've asked for this meeting because what happened to me wasn't an accident or an isolated incident. It was the inevitable result of years of medical neglect that nearly killed me." My father started to interrupt, but Dr. Rodriguez raised his hand, silencing him. "Please allow Emma to speak without interruption." I took a deep breath and continued, drawing strength from the supportive presence surrounding me. For 13 years since my diagnosis at age 7, my medical needs have been consistently treated as an inconvenience in our family. My appointments are canceled to accommodate Sophia's activities. My prescriptions are forgotten when they conflict with social events. My symptoms are dismissed as exaggeration or attention-seeking. I held up a thick folder containing printed text messages, emails, appointment cancellations, and financial records documenting years of systematic neglect. This isn't about assigning blame or seeking revenge. It's about acknowledging a dangerous pattern that will continue unless we address it directly. I nearly died because my medical needs were considered less important than a party. My mother's face crumpled with what appeared to be genuine remorse. "That's not fair, Emma. We've always provided you with excellent doctors and the best available treatments. When convenient," I finished for her. "When it didn't interfere with Sophia's debate tournaments, or college applications, or celebration parties. When it fit into your schedule. But diabetes doesn't work on your schedule. It doesn't wait for a convenient time to become life-threatening." The room fell into uncomfortable silence. Even Sophia looked stunned by the systematic evidence I'd presented of our family's dysfunction. "So, what exactly do you want?" my father finally asked, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "What's the point of this intervention?" "I want complete control over my medical decisions moving forward," I stated clearly. "I want a dedicated fund established specifically for my healthcare expenses, with me as the primary account holder. I want my own apartment near the hospital where I can manage my condition without depending on your inconsistent attention or competing with Sophia for basic necessities." My father's expression darkened with familiar anger. "You're asking for complete independence while still expecting us to pay for it. That's not how the real world works, Rachel." "Actually," Sarah interjected calmly, "in cases of documented medical neglect, that's exactly how it can work. Emma has sufficient grounds for legal action that could result in much more serious consequences for your family. What she's proposing is remarkably reasonable given the circumstances." The mention of legal consequences hit my father like a physical blow. His mind immediately calculated what a court case would do to his law practice, his professional reputation, his standing in the community. "You wouldn't," he said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. "I don't want to," I corrected him. "I'm offering a solution that protects everyone involved. You continue providing financial support for my medical needs as you're legally obligated to do anyway. I take complete responsibility for managing those needs without burdening you with involvement. No courts, no public records, no damage to the family reputation you value above my health." My mother reached for my hand with tears streaming down her face. "Emma, sweetheart, we never meant for things to get this bad. We just didn't realize how serious your condition could become." "You didn't want to realize," I interrupted gently but firmly. It was easier to minimize it, to treat it as a manageable inconvenience rather than a life-threatening condition that required consistent attention. To everyone's surprise, Sophia spoke up with a voice thick with emotion. She's absolutely right. We've all been terrible to her, and I was terrible too. She turned to face her parents directly. You've made it clear my entire life that I was the priority, that her health problems were obstacles we had to work around. I benefited from that favoritism, so I never questioned it. But I was wrong. We were all wrong. My father looked between his daughters, perhaps seeing for the first time the profound imbalance he had created and maintained for years. What exactly are you proposing in practical terms? He asked, his legal mind shifting into negotiation mode. I outlined my comprehensive plan: an apartment within walking distance of the hospital, a substantial healthcare account under my control, regular check-ins with Sarah to ensure compliance, and a structured visitation schedule to rebuild our family relationships on healthier, more honest terms. And if we refuse? My father asked, though his tone suggested he already understood the answer. Dr. Rodriguez spoke with quiet authority. Then we proceed with a formal investigation into medical neglect, with all the legal and professional ramifications that entails. The negotiation that followed was intense, but ultimately productive. My parents, confronted with irrefutable evidence and potentially severe consequences, reluctantly agreed to my terms. Sophia, in a surprising gesture of solidarity, offered to help me find and furnish an apartment using money from her own college fund. As the meeting concluded, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: the lightness of being truly seen, heard, and taken seriously. I had advocated for myself successfully. I had broken a lifelong pattern of accepting neglect as normal family dynamics. I'm proud of you, Dr. Martinez whispered as my family filed out of the room. That took extraordinary courage. It had required courage, but I was discovering that strength, like so many aspects of myself, had been there all along, waiting for the moment I decided to claim it and use it to save my own life. 8 months after the night I nearly died from diabetic ketoacidosis, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. My apartment, just 2 blocks from the hospital, had become my sanctuary, a space where every detail was designed around my health needs rather than in spite of them. The walls displayed my photography work, images that captured beauty and strength in unexpected places, reminding me daily of my creative voice and perspective. My diabetes management had become exemplary. The dedicated healthcare account ensured I never ran short of essential supplies. Dr. Martinez had connected me with a team of specialists who treated me as an active, intelligent participant in my own care rather than a problem to be managed. Most importantly, I had developed a support network of healthcare providers who respected my expertise about my own body and symptoms. The legal arrangement with my parents functioned exactly as intended. They provided financial support without controlling how I managed my medical needs. Our contact was limited to scheduled visits with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. It wasn't the warm, supportive family relationship I had once desperately wanted, but it was sustainable and safe, 2 qualities I had never before associated with my family dynamics. My relationship with Sophia had evolved in genuinely surprising ways. Initially awkward and guilt-ridden on her part, she had gradually become a real ally and advocate. She visited regularly, not from obligation but with sincere interest in my well-being and my life beyond my medical condition. I've been thinking about specializing in healthcare advocacy law after I finish medical school, she told me during one visit, curled up on my sofa with a cup of tea. What happened to you happens to too many people with chronic conditions. Someone should fight for them legally. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, but I appreciated that my trauma had sparked something meaningful and potentially helpful in her career direction. People could change when confronted with the real consequences of their actions and choices, though some changed more quickly and completely than others. My parents changed more slowly and with greater resistance. My father still struggled to discuss my diabetes without framing it as a problem requiring management rather than a condition requiring accommodation. My mother still occasionally suggested alternative treatments she'd read about in magazines, missing the point that I was now the expert on my own care needs. But they were making efforts within their limited capacity for growth, and I had learned to accept their attempts without expecting transformation. The most profound changes were within myself. I had discovered reserves of strength and self-advocacy I never knew I possessed. I had learned to prioritize my health needs without apology or justification to others. Most importantly, I had built connections with people who understood chronic illness not as a character flaw or inconvenience, but as one aspect of a complex, full life. My support network had expanded beyond anything I had previously imagined possible. I joined a young adult diabetes advocacy group and found friends who understood the daily calculations required to stay alive and healthy. I started a photography workshop for people with chronic conditions, creating space for others to express what words often couldn't capture about their experiences. Dr. Martinez remained a constant presence in my life, transitioning from medical provider to mentor and trusted advisor. During one of our regular appointments, he observed the changes in me.